Hello guys, this is group 6 history presentation and we are two presenters, I, Brian Otieno and Christine Gatwick. Let me welcome her for the first part of the presentation and then I shall join you later.
So we are going to get our first presentation, that is the background of historiography in Africa. And then it was a contention between Eurocentric historians and Afrocentric historians. The Eurocentric viewed Africa as a dark continent. Then, although African historiography has been in existence for only a short time, it is already rich and diverse. However, due to time constraint and inadequate knowledge, we will restrict ourselves here to historical literature published in French and English, especially in West Africa. Then we have, initially, Africa historiography was indebted to the work of the former colonialists. At least up to World War II, African communities were considered to be without history because it was not written down, which has since proved to be partially incorrect, as specialists completed writing history with living it. All peoples have always had history, and African history has shown itself to have been just as complex and turbulent as that of other continents. We were trapped in a dualistic approach between tradition, which was seen as intangible and inflexible, and modernity, which was automatically assumed to be colonial and Western. At the same time, to Europeans whose refreshing outlook heavily influenced young African historians, with little interest in the colonial history textbooks that are available then, were doing impressive work in scientific popularization for the general public on eve of independence. These were the British journalist Basil Davidson and French geographer Jean Surette-Canal. In 1959, Davidson published Old African, Rediscovered, the Story of Africa's Forgotten Past, which was published in French under the title Africa Avant l'Esperance, while Surette-Canal preceded him by a year in publishing the first volume of his work, Africa, Noir Accidental, subtitled Geography, Civilization, Historic. These work opened the eyes of the world, including Africans, one to the existence of African history long before colonization and to its rich source of interesting material. Welcome once more to our presentation. So, there is a general tendency today to speak of the reappropriation of history, or rather of the writing of history. In fact, their writings are not necessarily substantial, different, especially when we consider how freely researchers move about, particularly the new generations. Many international African historians see themselves as no different from others and do not believe that their history in essence any different from that of others. They are also aware that they are in the majority and often at least as competent, if not more so. They are therefore writing in their own way. They appreciate being able to discuss their history among themselves, ever more frequent in inter-African meetings. I'm going to welcome our next presenter.
Yes, as already explained by our first presenter, historiography basically was an argument or contention between Eurocentric, those who are the Europeans, and the Afrocentric, those who are believed to be African scholars who had studied in the West. This gives us two periods or two times of historiography. The first one is imperial historiography and the new African historiography. Imperial historiography basically was the past period. This was the argument of the Europeans that Africans had no history. Generally, we had two people who contended this. That was Hegel. We had Hegel, and then we had Trevor Roper. Then, according to imperial historiography, Africa had no history, and historical event in Africa was viewed as the work of outsiders or the work of Europeans in Africa. Then Africa history was seen as history of Europeans in Africa, and it was argued that Africa had no history since history begins with writing. Social Darwinism, which was the theory of Darwin, also accorded Europeans an intimate of superiority, and they show themselves to be superior over other races. Guys, to the interesting part of African historiography, we are going to look at new African historiography. And in new African historiography, this is the most interesting part of African historiography, which has brought new changes to African history due to publications which have been made about African history. We also have historical institutions and research institutes which have been brought along in research of African history. Thank you guys, that brings us to the end. And thank you for watching. See you next time.